It's an honor to introduce Mr. Chris Holman. He's an amazing man. In fact, I just kept thinking, I need to have him mentor me, but in what aspect of business? Because he's a businessman, he's passionate about the community, he's a great networker, and today he'll be talking to us about networking, because it's important to connect with the right people, or with people, period, to get anything done. So without much further ado, please put your hands together and welcome the one and only, the networking guru, Chris Holman.
Thank you, ladies. I appreciate this. And more importantly, I thank you for putting on this webinar and having all these people present. It's always great to talk about entrepreneurship because there's really no format for that. You know, this is not like addressing the employees at IBM who know what's going to happen every day they come to work. This is more like talking about the people who couldn't get a job at IBM, right? Because they're thinkers, they're visionaries, they're people who see the big plan out in the future. They're not necessarily the ones who go through the logistics of making these things happen. And this is what's so exciting about the world we live in with entrepreneurship. We are going to open this a little bit to the crowd because my dad once told me, this really stuck with me, when you're speaking, you're not learning. And you should think about that, because one of the skills that is the most important skill we have and that we pay the least attention to is listening. There's so much that comes out of listening, there's so much that comes out of observing. And I think in the area of entrepreneurship, at least this has been true for me, a lot of my success has been really in identifying market voids, market niches, looking at things and saying, oh, there's a need for this. And can it be done? A, is there a market for it? Is there interest in it? And B, can it be done cost effectively or for a profit? And we're going to use profit as a term, an endearing term here. There was a time when people said, oh, profit, oh, they're making money on this. You know, if you don't have money as kind of an incentive, a lot of the motivation for getting things done really goes away. I remember listening to a futurist once who was talking, and he said, if you think about it, the greatest advancements in the history of mankind came based on avarice. If you don't know what avarice is, it's a form of greed, and it's about making profit. You know, Thomas Edison, he didn't light the park so that everybody could have light and recreate in the evenings. He lit the park so people would understand electricity and buy light bulbs and string wires, right? Great advancement for mankind. Did Thomas Edison make money? Yeah, Thomas Edison made money, and that was part of the motivation. So those are the things we kind of want to go after. My task today is to speak a little bit about networking, which I have to say probably in my area has just incredibly changed, probably 300%, so it's flipped over a couple of times. As far as how it's done and how it's done effectively and what's caused this, well, primarily technology, right? I mean, what was the first announcement here today? Turn off your phones. Anybody go anywhere without their phones?
No.
Show of hands. Anybody leave this again? You went somewhere without your phone? Get home, get your phone.
I don't have a phone.
You don't have a phone?
No.
Okay. Nobody will remember his name because you can't get in contact with him, right? But the point is, technology has given us a window to the world. It's also, in case you haven't noticed, kept us from escaping. Not having a phone is one of those ways of doing it. Going to your place tucked in the woods up north is one of the ways to doing it, especially if you don't have internet, right? But primarily, our world now functions technologically way more than it ever has before. And the technology changes continually, and it's gone from, you know, cell phones that were bigger than your chest to everything happening on your wrist now through your iWatch. So it's been very difficult to see where you're effective. And I will tell you this, as a guy who's in that industry now with the Michigan Business Network, you can give all the numbers you want, but advertising, marketing, the principle is still you have to spend dollars, and some of them are needlessly spent, but you don't know which one. So you still have to go ahead and spend. And the same thing happens electronically, because you can count your hits, you can count your views, you can count the clicks into what you have, whatever you want to count. It's numerically measured and distributed in that direction. What does it mean? It means some of it works, because we don't know exactly what happens and who's clicking and who's not. We found sometimes that we get a fair number of clicks from other countries, from foreign countries, who can't possibly be interested in what we're doing, but they monitor what we're doing so they get a broader perspective of what's happening in the marketplace. So electronics is something that really, and if you don't have the expertise, which I will stand up here and tell you I do not, make sure you get people who do have that expertise, and I've been very fortunate enough to get them on my staff, people who understand it, how it works, etc. And knowing that we're still experimenting. You know, we always say at the Michigan Business Network, we're cutting trail. If you're an entrepreneur, you're probably cutting trail. And if you're not, you're on a road with a lot of other traffic. That means you're in a more competitive circumstance. No blue water there. It means that you're working at probably more of a price-oriented market than you are at a value-added type market. So those are some important things about you know, the marketing electronically. Let me tell you some other things that I firmly believe are true. There is nothing that supplants, nothing that replaces face-to-face. And it's kind of interesting because we do a lot of things at the Michigan Business Network where we send out blasts and we send out to our database announcements, all right? What's the percentage of announcements that come back or are responded to? 1%, 2%. But I can tell you that if we personally call or we personally visit, the close rate, the response rate is much higher and the close rate is much higher. So there's nothing that's ever going to replace that face-to-face. Electronically, no matter how advanced we get, if we get to that stage, believe me, we're going to have colonies on other planets because the personal interaction is going to account for nothing. But those are important things, I think, for you to remember. One of the things that I have found that is crucially positive for moving forward is getting involved, not just in what you do, but the community that you're serving. Now that community may be your town, it may be your state, it may be your country. But getting involved in those areas that are affected by your product or your service is really instrumental. So you've got to get out there and you've actually got to say, hey, not only are we doing our business here, we're helping improve the marketplace. We're doing what we can. Things like speaking here, things like attending here, these types of situations are so enhancing to what you can do. When Edna called me and said, can you speak? That's all the farther she had to go. I knew it was LCC, I knew it would be marketing, I knew it would be things. It's in my community. It's helping better my community. I don't think she finished her sentence when I said I could make it. So I think we all need to get out there and do those types of things. So when you're marketing, when you're networking, there's a couple of things you need to know about your product and your service before you go there. One is, don't make the mistake of having what I've always called a passionpreneurship. I had a lady once, because I do, like many of you in the room here, I do a lot of mentoring. I do a fair amount of counseling for startups and even people who have been in business and plateaued and aren't sure why. But I had a woman come to me once that said she wanted to start a quilt shop. And it was really based on the fact that she loved quilts and that she remembered as a youth being bundled in a quilt, and it was so security driven, and she wanted everybody to experience that. And so we talked through a few things, and quite frankly, I said, you know, you're only going to grow so big because you want to make these quilts by hand, and your capacity to grow is only going to be based on a number of people. And unfortunately she did. She hired a few people, they made a bunch of quilts, and someone somewhere has a closet full of quilts right now. And the point of that is, in your networking, do your market research. make darn sure that you know there's a market for what you're going to do. And the other lesson there for me was, when you get to a certain point, you need to kind of back off. You need to look at the reality of the thing and say, this is going beyond the logic. Don't spend much more time here. Another phrase my dad always had is, you can bend over to help someone, but not to the point where you hurt your own back. And it's true, because if you hurt your own back, then you can't help the next person that comes along. So you've got to be pragmatic in looking at those things. Don't get caught up in passionpreneurships. Make sure that what you have has an audience. So do your market research ahead of time. I have a great lesson for this in a business publication that I owned for 26 years. When I started, I talked to 47 of 50 community leaders, a list that I'd been given by the director of the chamber at that time, and spent time with them and really talked to them before I ever started this magazine. It was interesting because a big part of it was pre-marketing. So when you're in there talking to people and saying, I'm thinking of doing this magazine, it's a business magazine, da 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 da, what do you think? It's great. Timing couldn't be better. This is a great thing. Well, that's nice. And that's the same type of stuff that your grandparents tell you. You're really doing good here, right? At that point, the next question was, so would you support it? And to what extent, right? So that's the pre-marketing part. That's the networking part that can be monetized. That's the part where you can say, okay, now I've got something going. Now I know where the profit might be, or at least the revenue, and we'll get to the profit later. And it was a smashing success. That was one of the best things I ever did. I don't think that we had 30 days that we didn't make money in 26 years. So it was very good. And it also, that's the way the market says to you, we needed this. If they support it, then they say, we needed this. And that was the best feeling of all. The other thing is to get involved in not just causes, but events. Get to events, get to know people, and do this with your staff. If you get to a point where you've got people working for you, you know, there's nothing more disheartening for me than to go somewhere and see a company all sitting at the same table. I mean, think about that. That's like saying, go to the family reunion, but don't talk to anybody but your spouse, right? How are you going to learn? How are you going to introduce your product, your service, et cetera, et cetera? You know, one of my friends long ago taught me this, and they were one of those people who just went up to people and said, hey, my name is so-and-so, what do you do? And at first I thought, that's like kind of rude. And then I realized that people were reacting, because why? You get to listen, which is one of your most important skills, and they get to do what they like most, which is tell you about them. And that's not a bad quality, by the way. I'm not saying that that's a negative thing, but that gives them an opportunity to share. Well, all of a sudden, you kind of bond a little more quickly than if you're kind of like light chatter in a group, right? And certainly way more than if you're all sitting at the same desk. So the personal networking piece, you have to do that. When you go to events, go out and do that. When you're speaking, I think it's important to know the audience. This is a very important audience because we're looking at people who are thinking of starting businesses. Well, what are the ramifications of that? They start businesses, they get product out there, they get improvement, they get value added, and they hire people. And if they hire people, that helps all of us economically, right? Because that's one of our biggest challenges right now, is rebuilding kind of our middle class, kind of the people who were working class folks, and a lot of their jobs have gone away. So entrepreneurship is extremely important. It does feed it. There was a time when I said, if I run into one more politician who says small business is the engine, the economic engine of the state, you know, it's so true. Everybody ascribes to it. Not everybody votes for it, but everybody ascribes to it, and it really is true. So it's a very important circumstance. So we got about 10 minutes left here, and I'd rather open it a little bit to the crowd because, again, I kind of came here to learn, and we're very fortunate to have some really good people in this audience. And matter of fact, a group right here, you guys just yell out as loud as you can who you are, because what these guys started in DeWitt and now has gone, what, are you international yet?
Not yet, but we're getting there.
Okay.
And this event's helping us to do that, so we appreciate that.
Excellent, excellent.
It's a 10-year anniversary.
It's what?
10-year anniversary this year.
Oh, you're kidding. Oh my goodness, that's tremendous. Tell everybody a little bit about your group, because this is really fascinating stuff.
We started in 2008 in the midst of the the Great Recession, and it was a way to try to think about how we could better utilize high school talent to plug into the community and try to help the community, whether that be assisting startups, whether that be getting involved with projects with government, nonprofits, colleges and universities, to spread the gospel, if you will, of entrepreneurship, but also social entrepreneurship. That it's not just about necessarily starting a business, but it's also about what can we do to make a climate that's more friendly to people taking risks and really doing positive things to build a greater awareness of that. And we've formed many partnerships. I think now we've done over 300 projects with many students during the 10 years. We have a podcast show on the Michigan Business Network, which we're truly appreciative of.
Yay!
Sorry for the free little plug there. And it's been a wonderful experience working with people throughout the state and supporting other like-minded groups and seeing where, sharing best ideas and practices.
You mentioned cutting the trail earlier, and we're very much in that same narrative about opening doors and connecting the dots with students that get them outside of the classroom, not only the four walls or within their district, but so many students have the radius of 10 miles within their school. We're saying we can tap in to the region, we can tap into the state, and we just need to figure out ways to give them creative opportunities to do so. And once you open those doors, it's unbelievable. And even those that are shut, the students figure out a way to outmaneuver or find detours around that. Right. And so it's very empowering to see them have this fearless attack on opportunity.
Well, there's a reason that I called you guys out. I didn't mean to put you on the spot here, because we've got great expertise. Dan here has taught at LCC. He's turned out more people. Matter of fact, several of my employees, I think they have a little statue of him, like you used to have of Mary, on your shelf. This guy's a hero too. But you guys did cut trail, and that to me was really important. You actually got kids involved, and I want to tell you right now, according to our surveys, the number one problem is talent. And business needs talent, and they're now finding they can't grow because they can't get that talent. Were you well received by the business community?
Absolutely, yeah. More so than the educational community. I don't want to attack the K-12 systems. It's been supportive, but I think it's obviously more complicated. But no, the business community overwhelmingly has given us the further motivation to continue to do what we're doing, because the market yet hasn't signaled to us fully as what we're talking about. But I think it's getting ready to. I think we're getting close to a tipping point, because talent, it's trickling down now. A lot of the government, the state's talent initiatives now starting to get more into high school there, because they realize they have to get students earlier. An example I wanted to give, and what we'd like to do in the future, is to partner more with the Michigan Economic Development Corporation. They have prosperity regions, and one event that we did last year was we had students participate in a fashion show at the runway here in Lansing. We know Lansing wants to do that. Our prosperity region wants to create a fashion industry. So we thought, how could we get students involved with that, do something positive that helps to promote the startups, the apparel startups in the runway, but also expose them to those products. So it creates a virtuous sort of cycle. And we did the event, and we partnered with Leap on that, and the runway was a huge success.
Yeah, well, Bob Trezise does a wonderful job at Leap, and there is a lot of that going on. And of course, you ran into Laura Etch on there, who is a former MSU basketball player that has her own line of stuff. Tremendous stuff. I mean, it really is, and that's kind of where we need to go. I remember being at the Henry Ford. Probably now it's about 6 years ago, and it was introducing the M² program, which is kind of patterned after the German method of education funneling kids to jobs. So it was companies that came in and adopted kids that were juniors in high school, and part of their curriculum was working a day a week in that plant. And so by the time you were a senior, now you were working 2 days a week in that plant, and you understood the plant, and they understood you. So maybe the cultures matched up as well. And this was a great little segue into, here's your full-time employment. And if you want to go on in the trades, we'll pay for that. If you want to get your 4-year degree, we'll pay for that while you're here, right? And so these kinds of programs are really, really important. And there's nothing like internships and that sort of thing to get these kids into. Now, last question for you, because we're running out of time here. How did the kids respond to this? Now all of a sudden you're saying, you know, one of the keys here is the business community. Did they buy that?
Oh yeah,
glue.
Like glue. They love it. They love going to events that normally they wouldn't have the opportunity to attend, and they're networking with business professionals. They're finding opportunities where.
What was that word?
Networking.
Networking.
Yeah. And no, it makes them feel more important. I think the business professionals get excited too, because they get around these young people that have these fresh ideas, this energy, and then it helps to connect some of the talent pipelines between some of the different clusters in our area, so they can get more directly to the high school students and show them what they have to offer, and to try to get them to stay in the area and pursue a career.
So oftentimes the students are hearing information about the achievement gap. And as soon as they're introduced to this exposure gap or the generation gap or this courage gap, then they're saying, wait, there's something else out there just besides the academic gap. And if they have exposure and if they are empowered to express this courage, and if they're understanding that there's more stakeholders out there that are invested in them, they become more empowered, they feel like they are fearless, they can do anything, and thus that trickles down to their academic achievement. Thus they end up asking more questions, they diversify themselves more, like you spoke of earlier, as far as the tables that they find, and then it's endless, and then you just cannot put the toothpaste back in the tube.
This sounds like a really crazy world you live in, right?
No, but it's great though.
But isn't that the beauty of it?
Yeah.
Yes. It's interesting because I not only was a dean at this wonderful community college for a number of years, but I also was an adjunct at MSU. And one of the things I found, and Dan, get ready because I'm coming to you for comment, was the way the audience had changed, the audience being the students. And I found during that period something that was instrumental to me in my success. And that was that nobody in the audience watched the 6 o'clock news, nobody read the newspaper, and nobody listened to their news on the radio. They got absolutely everything off the internet. All right, so positive or negative, it means their mode of communication was the internet. Dan, you interface with these kids on a daily basis. The kids you're sending me are internet savvy, that's where they go for everything. Has that changed your teaching style at all?
It has, Chris. There's 2 classes that I've taught at LCC for sales. I teach the in-house class, the eye-to-eye, nose-to-nose. The one that sells out is the online class. But yet I'll get students in my class that are taking it because they did a little research, they found out who I am and said, I've seen so many positive reviews about your class, I want to take it in-house. Well, one, I'm sorry to hear that we have an online sales course or an online class for sales. Because to me, it's a laboratory class. It's like chemistry. You need to be in the laboratory to mix the chemicals. Just as in sales, you need to build self-confidence by being in a room full of strangers and getting in front and talking to build your self-confidence, because that's what sales is about. You talked about the gentleman that went up to people and said, hi, my name is so-and-so, what do you do? That takes a tremendous amount of confidence for anyone at any age to go up to a complete stranger and ask them about them. That's all about human relations. The one thing that I've discovered in my 27 years in sales is people buy from people they know, like, trust, and respect. It is hard to get to know, like, trust, and respect somebody over the internet. Matter of fact, there's so many scams and frauds and other opportunities that people are resistant to build relationships over the internet. But yet, when you meet somebody in the first 5 to 7 seconds, you have already judged that person and decide, am I going to move this relationship to another level?
Well, another thing is that's so important, Dan, thanks for that input, is the confidence of dealing with probable rejection. because you get rejected a whole lot more than you get positive feedback. And the resiliency that's required to respond, to rebound from that, and still go on with your mission, be committed to it, is so important. So our time is up, and as always happens, you never have enough time to really do what you want to do. And I want to thank you all for having me here, because I learned a great deal, because I didn't speak the entire time. So I want to thank all of you for being here and getting out there and doing what you're doing, because you're really enhancing your community. And with that, thank you all so very much.
Thank you.